and welcome to this Design Cuts video tutorial. Today we're looking at making successful cutouts in Photoshop. Before we get started, I want to show you where the image that I'm using came from. It's from one of our Design Cuts collection, and this is 70 modern vintage images. And there are a whole lot of really cool images here, and this same photographer also has some flat layouts that you might want to have a look at if you like these images. So over here in Photoshop, I have the image already open. I'm going to show you the process for making a cutout and then for blending that cutout into a series of backgrounds. When you're making cutouts in Photoshop, you have a number of tools to use. You could use tools like the quick selection tool, but if you use the pen tool and make a path, then you have a few more options perhaps for actually using that cutout in future. So I'm going to show you the basis of using the pen tool to make your path. We'll start by clicking on the pen tool to select it and zoom into the area that you want to start working on. So I'm going to start around here. With the pen tool selected, I'll click and drag just a short way because I'm headed in a sort of straight line here, so the handles don't have to be too big. I'll click and drag here because I want to start coming around this curve, but this handle needs to be straightened out, so I'll hold down the Alt key on a PC, Option on a Mac, and just straighten it. That breaks the connection between these two handles and lets me adjust them independently. I'm going to come over here and make this full curve just in one step. Wherever possible, you want the space between successive anchors here to be as large as possible. You don't want lots of anchor points. You're not going to end up with as smooth a result as you will if you have less anchor points. So I'm just going to click and drag and click and drag. There's a slight dent here where these rollers are around this shape, and I want to try and get that into my selection. So click and then just drag a little bit. To send the handles the other way, hold the Alt or Option key. To move the image, I'm holding the spacebar. The spacebar turns the current tool into the hand tool, and that allows you to move the image. As soon as you finish doing that, just let go the spacebar and you'll revert to whatever tool it was that you were using before you press the spacebar. It just saves a trip to the tool palette every time you need to make a change. I'm going to adjust this point here, so I'll hold down the Control or Command key and just drag it in. The Control or Command key allows you to get access to any of the anchor points that you've previously drawn so that you could adjust them should you need to do so. As soon as you're done adjusting them, let go of the Control or Command key and you'll go back to the area that you're working on. Now, I'm not going to work all the way around this shape with you. I'm just showing you the basics of using the pen tool. Some people prefer to adjust all these anchor points as they go. Other people just do a fairly rough pen tool line around the shape and then come back later and edit it. And it's really up to you what your personal preference is. One other thing that you will need to make sure of is that you're working on path here. So when you do select the pen tool, make sure that of the options in this drop-down dialog that you have the path option selected so you're making a path. It's in actual fact going to be called a work path. Now, when you've finished your selection, once you come all the way around the shape, you'll just hover over the starting point and you'll see a little 0, a little O in the bottom right corner of the mouse pointer, and just click once to complete that shape. And of course, I'm way short on what I need to have, but I took the precaution of actually making this path a little bit earlier. So let's go to the path palette and see what we've got. This is the work path that we're actually working on right now. And when you make your path, it's going to be called the work path. The nice thing about this path is that it can be edited at any time. You can go back here to the direct selection tool, click on any of these anchor points and then adjust them. So it's fully editable. That allows you to, for example, make a rough selection, go and have a cup of coffee and come back and then finesse it. There's no rush to get this right. Whenever you create a work path, I suggest that once the work path is made, that you drag it onto this new icon here and turn it into a path. That gives it a little bit more stability in the document. The work path itself can sometimes disappear in Photoshop depending on what you're doing. Paths do not. So here's the selection I made earlier. So let's go and click on that. I'm going to press Control or Command 0 to zoom back out. And this is the selection that I've made around my shape. Now, this path, if I save this document as a PSD file, is going to be saved in that file, so it's easily accessible anytime in future. You'll just open up the Paths palette, click on the path, and you'll see the path around your shape. Now, having made your path, you can now go ahead and make your cutout, and there are a few ways to do that. One of them is to go to the Layers palette. I'm going to unlock this layer. In some versions of Photoshop, you'll need to double click on this layer to be able to unlock it. And I'm going to add a vector mask. To do this, I'll hold down the Control or Command key and click once on the Add Mask icon, and that adds a vector mask. The vector mask itself is fully editable, so you can edit it using the pen tool and the direct selection tool and the path selection tool as you would any regular path. But it is masking out the areas of the image that we don't want to see and leaving us with our cutout. Now there is another way that you can approach this task. Let me just delete this vector mask and let's go back to the Paths palette. If you select your path, you'll see that there's an option here to turn your path into a selection. So you can turn a regular path into a Photoshop selection. And if you prefer to use a selection, then it's easily accessible from a path. Whereas the other way around, it's not. It's not so easy to get a really good path out of a selection, but it's very easy to get a good selection out of a path. So if we go back to the Layers palette here, we could again just click here to add a layer mask. In this case, because it's a selection, it's not going to be a vector mask. Before we go too much further, let's have a look and see how good our selection was. I'll hold Control or Command on a Mac and click here on the new layer icon because that allows me to add a new layer beneath the current layer. White is my background layer, so I'll press Control Backspace on a PC, Command Delete on a Mac to fill this layer with the current background color. You'll see around this shape that we have a fairly crisp line. That may not always be the kind of look that you want. Let's go back and let's get rid of this mask for a minute. I'm just going to delete it but not apply it. Going back to the Paths panel, I'm going to reselect my path and I'm going to make a selection from my path. But this time, before I create my mask, I'm going to feather the edge. I'm going to soften the edge a little bit. So I'll choose Select and then Modify and Feather. Now this image doesn't need a lot of feathering. Even though it's really large, it's about 5,500 pixels in width and about 3,500 pixels in height. A feather radius of about 5 is going to be a pretty good value. So I'll click OK. And I'll click again to add a layer mask. This time the edges are a little bit softer. So if you want to blend your cutout into an underlying image, you may find that a slightly feathered edge will give you a better result than a really crisp, sharp edge. It's up to you, but that's how you would add a feather to a selection. Now you can do that when you're creating a mask based on a selection, but if you want to create a mask based on a vector path, then you can't do that. So that might tip the balance for you as to whether you use a vector mask and have really, really sharp edges, or whether you prefer to use some feathering, in which case you want to convert your path into a selection and then use a standard bitmap mask. When you're putting a shape like this on a lighter surface, you'll find that the surface is going to throw a little bit of its color into the image. And right now here we've got some really dark edges up here. Some of your possibilities for blending this shape into a background are to add a layer style. So I'll go back to my shape layer and click the FX icon and I'm going to choose an inner glow. For my inner glow, I'm going to select a white or light color. So let's just go for white. I'm going to set the blend mode to screen because that's a lightening blend mode. I'll increase the size a little bit so that it's definitely going to impact the image, and I'll increase also perhaps the opacity. And what I'm looking to do is to lighten this edge a little bit to blend the shape a little bit better into the light background. You can see here if I disable the inner glow and enable it, you're seeing the result. I think the size is way too much. And I could probably have done a slightly better job of my selection in the first place. But the inner glow will allow you to add a little bit of lightening around the edge of the shape, which will help blend it into a lighter background. Now let's have a look at a darker background. I'm going to press Alt Backspace on the PC. That would be Option Delete on the Mac to add a black background. And you can see that this white lightning is not working on our black background. So let's go and trash our inner glow and let's go and make a different one. Inner glows are things that appear on the inside of an object, and they don't have to be lightning glows. They can be darkening. You just have to know how to set them up. So I'm going to set this up with a sort of black color here, or a darker color. And I'll set the blend mode to multiply. So in this case, we've turned our lightning glow into a darkening glow. And have a look along the edges when I turn it on and off, and you can see that there's a distinct difference in the edges, and it's helping us blend this shape into the black background. You can also use color glows, and you might use a color glow, for example, if you have a background that is, say, a red, because anything on a red background is going to get a little bit of red light thrown at it. So let's go back to our inner glow here, and instead of the black, we're going to go and select a red. I could sample the red from the background as well. I'm going to increase the size, but maybe decrease the opacity. And what that does is throw a slight red color into the edges of the shape, again helping it blend into whatever it is that you have underneath. Now you could even build up these inner glows. You could add quite a sizable inner glow, but at a very low opacity if you wanted to throw a little bit of extra red in there. So there are some of your options for making cutouts in Photoshop. I strongly recommend that you try to get a handle on the pen tool if you haven't already got a handle on it, so that you can use it to make cutouts. Be aware of the difference between using vector masks and bitmap masks, and being able to feather the selection when you use a bitmap mask. And then your options for example, using inner glows to blend the edges of a shape so it fits better onto a background, whether that be a solid color background, which is the most difficult to work with, or just a dark textured background or a light textured background. I hope that you've enjoyed learning these Photoshop techniques. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this tutorial. Until next time, I'm Helen Bradley for Design Cuts.